In 2013, I was out metal detecting in the woods along Ben Ficklin Road in the southern portion of San Angelo, Texas. There had once been a military trail and a stagecoach station in the vicinity of where I was detecting, not to mention the old town of Ben Ficklin, which is just a few miles west of where I was poking around at. I initially started detecting on the north side of the river that flows through there, but then I heard what sounded like the hum of another metal detector in the thick trees on the south side of the stream. I knew the vicinity I was in was a hotspot for local detectors, and I thought that maybe one of them was out that day as well, so I decided to cross the river and maybe rendezvous with them. I crossed to the south side of the river and started making my way into the woods. I was listening for another signal, never heard any, and nonetheless kept venturing further into the thickets. The woods of western Texas are not as extravagant or extraordinary as the pine forests in eastern Texas, but they are very thick, especially when you get further back into them. Towering pecan limbs and cragged mesquite branches quickly envelope you, and suddenly you're as hidden from the world as an ant crawling into its mound. Outlaws during the Old West often used the woods as hideaways and escape routes, and I suppose there are some contemporary crooks that do the same thing. Nature is indeed like a loving mother, cradling all creatures in her bosom regardless of them being good or bad. Of course, I wasn't thinking about any of the dangers that could be lingering in the woods, except for possibly a rattlesnake. As I started to wander around the trees, my sole intent was to find my fellow hobbyists, swap some secrets, and maybe find the site of the vanished stage stop together. After all, it sounded like they might have been one of the few that already knew where it was. Hugging close to the river so that I wouldn't be swallowed whole by the woods, I kept trudging through the brush and trees in eager search for that other detectoress. I reached the vicinity of where I had heard that initial deep hum from the other side of the river, and I decided to venture away from the water and start searching through the woods. It wasn't real far from the river's edge when I came across the clue that should have turned me away from the woods right then and there. It was a campsite, one that seemed just recently utilized. Ben Ficklin Road was not a destination for campers, not to mention that the nearest official camping ground was about 15 miles away on the other side of town. Yet, here in the thick embrace of Mother Nature was a solitary tent surrounded by scattered clothes and empty canned goods. Whoever was here had been here for quite a while. I stood there for a moment, just looking in disbelief at the campsite. It was no secret that there were trails of illegal immigrants coming into San Angelo, with Mexico only about 4 hours away. Naturally, that is the explanation I told myself for the campsite, and it didn't trouble me that much. I thought, I have no beef with illegals. Most are just trying to make life better for their families. So with that notion in mind, I continued further into the woods. I only got a few yards further when I heard footsteps crashing through the brush and fallen leaves. Oddly enough, my first thought was that I had finally found the other metal detectorist. But out of the trees came a guy in a tattered up shirt and mud-stained blue jeans, and immediately the guy locked eyes with me. I think I surprised him just as much as he surprised me. "Were you just at my campsite?" the guy demanded to know. I answered him affirmatively and honestly, then added that I hadn't messed with anything and inquired if he had been metal detecting. "No, I ain't been metal detecting," he said lowly. "Is that what you're doing out here?" I had my metal detector in my hand and an old crusty foxhole shovel in the other, with a pocketed apron tied around my waist, so it didn't take much to convince him. Then it was my turn to ask the questions. The guy paused for a moment, kinda looking around, and then answered me. "My old lady tossed me out a few days ago. Figured I'd camp here till things settled down. Ain't wantin' to be too close to that river in case it floods. What you searchin' for out here?" I related the information about the military trail and the stagecoach station, then told him that I knew a bunch of people that frequented this spot fairly regularly. Reflecting back now, I think that's the statement that probably saved my life. I remember that he kind of seemed a bit shaken up and nervous when I told him that the vicinity was a well-known metal detecting spot. "Well," he said, "just don't bother my camp, all right? I got some stuff in there that I don't want messed with." Naturally, I said okay, and that was that. He went back to his tent and sat outside of it watching my direction until I decided to retreat back to the river's edge about 5 minutes later. I didn't want him to think that I was rushing off in a hurry, and I even said goodbye and good luck as I headed away. A few days later, another metal detectorist went out to that spot and was telling me about some of the things he had uncovered. I asked him if he had encountered the same guy I had, and he replied that he saw the pile of open cans in the spot where the guy's tent had been, but nothing more. I didn't think much of the odd encounter until just last year, when the body of a young woman was found in the vicinity of where the man's campsite had been. Tests on her remains revealed who she was, and that she'd been reported missing in 2013. Her boyfriend, at the time, was the prime suspect. I followed the case very closely, and when the guy was caught, I recognized his face very clearly. Nowadays, although I no longer live in San Angelo, I always keep a heavy iron Colt pistol holstered on my hip every time I venture into the cradling bosom of Mother Nature. Growing up in the small town of Millfield, Indiana, I was always an adventurous spirit. So, when my friend, Tyler, suggested we explore the dense woods behind our neighborhood park, I was all in. It was the summer of 2009 and we were both 13 years old, eager to discover the secrets of the forest. The park, called Thompson Park, was located on the outskirts of town and was known for its rolling hills and deep ravines. The well-worn trail that snaked through the woods was a popular destination for hikers, and Tyler and I had heard countless tales of the strange sounds that echoed through the forest at night. We set out on our adventure on July 10, 2009. The sun was shining and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees. As we walked deeper into the woods, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer beauty of our surroundings. The trail wound its way up and down steep hills and through narrow valleys, and I felt as if we were walking through a magical world that was hidden from the rest of the world. It was about an hour into our hike when I heard it, a scream that pierced the stillness of the forest. It wasn't a yell for help, like the ones we had heard before, but a blood-curdling scream that seemed to come from far away. Tyler and I exchanged a look of alarm, and without a word, we set off in the direction of the sound. We searched for what seemed like hours, but we couldn't find anyone. Just as we were about to give up, I heard the scream again, much closer this time. It was coming from behind us. We called out, but there was no answer. Fear began to set in, and we quickened our pace, retracing our steps back to the trail. Just as we were about to emerge from the forest, I heard the scream a third time, and it was much closer, only about 50 meters away. This time, it was accompanied by a rustling of leaves and twigs snapping underfoot. Tyler and I took off running, our hearts pounding in our chests as we sprinted down the trail. We burst out of the forest and stumbled onto the park's main road, gasping for breath. We called the police, and when they arrived, we told them what we had heard. They searched the woods but found no trace of anyone. To this day, the source of that scream remains a mystery. Looking back, I realized that we were lucky to make it out of the woods unscathed. That experience taught me the importance of being prepared and cautious when exploring the unknown, and it will forever be ingrained in my memory as one of the most dramatic encounters of my life.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay tuned for more true stories.